Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome Cinematographer Marshal Adams ASC, who joins us to talk about their work on Pluribus. Marshal will talk us through the creative decisions made to create the look of the show. Please be warned that there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Marshal. Hi, Marshal. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rob. It's nice to be here.
We're here to talk about Pluribus Season 1, which came out at the tail end of last year. And before we jump into the nitty-gritty, how have you found the reception to the show?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, the show is everybody has really loved what they've seen, and they're excited about the second season. It's been great, and working with Vince is always a very kind of visual experience. So it gets a lot of attention, which is fantastic. It's been a dream.
And I think you could see from like the show itself, it's just, I think people just didn't enjoy what they're seeing and the fact that they've got another Vince Gilligan show. And yeah, I think just that the sort of like the strength of the show with like how character driven it is, and how you're sort of on the same par as the actors and characters. Yeah, that helps a lot as well when you're sort of trying to figure out what's going on. You're kind of on the edge of your seat as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a cinematographer's dream to be working on a show that has just such an incredible script and character development and ideas behind it that it really makes it an all-around incredible experience that everybody gets to enjoy.
Yeah, 100%. And I can imagine going to work each day is quite fun, knowing you've got all of that to shoot ahead of you, and it's not a slog just getting out the car.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Shooting there in Albuquerque was great because I actually lived there also, so it was like being home. But they built the whole cul-de-sac, and it kind of came together slowly, but it really was well thought out so that we had access to everything that we needed. We could fly the helicopter in and land it in the backyard of the house without disturbing the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really well done.
It must be nice knowing, like, shooting in your hometown, knowing that you can sleep in your own bed each night rather than like if you're shooting somewhere else, like staying in a hotel or
Yeah,
rented accommodation.
yeah. I'm actually in Nashville, Tennessee right now, working on a series here, so I know exactly that feeling.
Yeah, it's nothing like your own bed. But going back to like the visual style of the show, and you're mentioning now about building the whole cul-de-sac of houses. Where do you begin in creating the look for the show? Because you worked with Vince on a number of things, and you're back in Albuquerque. Is there something there that you kind of feel like you might be too much of a copy and paste on previous shows of Vince's shows, should I say?
Yeah, I mean, his aesthetic and I think mine and Paul's are always kind of developing in addition to the production design, having a big influence too. Vince kind of came with some preconceived visual ideas about the show early on. I presented myself and Paul with a lot of the Kodachrome old stills, and he loved the way the kind of color landed, and thought it was an interesting idea to kind of apply that to this kind of reshaping of the world, and it would have this kind of familiar feel to it. So we shot some tests. So we had a lot of time, in between Saul and the first season. There was a whole strike, and they were furiously building the cul-de-sac during all of that, but Yeah, we shot some tests, and we went to photocam and kind of went through them and found something that we really loved, and that's kind of what we marched forward with. But with that or with the Kodachrome kind of vibe to it, and just a sense of familiarity that you kind of feel at home with that. You don't quite know why, but it's a detail that strikes in a place that people love.
I think it's not just the details, like the color that's used throughout the show, so that like it doesn't, nothing feels very muted. So you have that sort of warmth throughout the show, and that it's not the typical post-apocalyptic landscape where there's no sun, nothing grows, everything is dead, blah blah blah, which might progress in later on in another series or two, because you see, there's not that many humans there, but then also at the same time, the earth is healing, so other vegetation is going to come through. You might start hearing in the sound design animals that you might not notice are there if there's humans around. I think you see the pack of wolves come out at night, especially coming to like a more residential area as well. And I think with the color that's in the production design, and also the fact that it's in Albuquerque, but then also shooting in Vegas, and also being in, I think it's Gran Canaria is the other location, um,
Yeah,
and
and
then
northern Spain.
yeah, and then also place doubling up as Peru, and then also the journey that Manunos,
Yeah,
his journey. And yeah, just everything's very luscious and colorful, and I think that's what is like the warmth and that familiarity, plus all the other locations as well.
yeah. Well, it's a little, it's a kind of a juxtaposition between his kind of paranoia and the fact that everybody continues to want to kind of take care of him on that journey. They save him more than once, and it's it was very important to Vince and to Paul and I also was to pivot on Carol for all of her stuff, to really feel almost, have her in almost every frame that was part of her story. And the same applied to Menuno's story too. It was a travel, it was a trip up through one of the most difficult terrains in the world, and watching him make that, the discoveries that he made along that travel were a lot, kind of shaped him in a lot of ways, but also shaped our feelings of where he was coming from and what he was about.
Yeah, and you see that as well, just the sort of determination to find Carol as well, and the way he goes about it all. Um, yeah, I really enjoy that sort of visually, and it's also the way that in a show like this, it allows it to breathe those moments as well. And you'll see
Yeah.
that in like cold opens throughout, where it kind of feels like more of a silent movie, and you're watching the character figure something out. With those sort of scenes, like, how do you go about figuring out the shot lists for stuff like that? Because I know that we'll cut it up and edit, and it will need to last whatever 5 minutes, for example. But when you're shooting it, do you feel like you don't want to overcomplicate your shots and just allow the actor to play in the space more than trying to sort of reveal too much?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Vince has a thing about not wanting to reuse the same shot. So if it's, left to his own devices, it would be a new shot every time. But one of the things that Paul and I both agree on is that we don't ever want somebody to go, wow, look at that cool shot. It's not about that. It's about the storytelling, and being a tool of the storytelling, so that now, if that means that we're in a interesting place that you've always wanted to look from, inside of a gas cap or wherever it might be, so be it. But we don't ever do shots where we kind of go around people and scream, look at me on the camera. So it's definitely in our thinking and our planning. With Vince, he has very specific ideas about how he wants to shoot things. He comes with a roadmap of every shot, and Paul and I are both excited if we can talk him into one more, shot that's an idea of either one of ours along the way, because he's cut it in his head and he has a very specific idea. A lot of the other directors all have different approaches, but that was definitely the way it was with Vince.
When you have a director that comes up with their shots and they're kind of discussing with you, do you find that in a way that as a cinematographer, I guess it's slightly different because you've got a shorthand with Vince, but do you find that you have somebody who's really prepared to the point that you might be like, are we allowed to freestyle a bit more and not freestyle, but improvise a little bit with how the story's going to play out, because you might rehearse it at the time and block it, but then one or two things might not work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you come in with a kind of a preconceived idea as to what the blocking will be, and the actors always, you want them to have their input, and so it can change, it can maneuver around. You can end up on the on the wrong side of the window light. It's it can get tricky, but it's important to Vince and all the directors that we bring a look and aesthetic that that is pleasing to the show and is positive to the show. And we're always willing to kind of call an audible. One of the things we did in the beginning of episode 6, which in Vegas, when we first discover the poker game, we did that whole Steadicam shot and we rehearsed, and the operator had a lot of ideas. I had a lot of ideas, obviously the director, she had a lot of ideas, and that was a kind of culmination of enough time to really kind of massage it and find a place that we all liked and felt was right, for the scene and for the show.
Yeah, and I guess as well, it's like a big collaboration process in making a TV show. And when you're working with different directors, they all want their own, even though you probably have like an overall visual guide to how you're going to present the show. But then also as a director, they probably want their own flair added to it as well. How does those sort of discussions go about? Because even though in your mind you have a visual idea of what the show's going to be like, but how do you allow a director to sort of say, actually, could we just tweak it just a little bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am there to serve the director, and the director's been brought onto the show because they want their ideas and their visual concepts to kind of come through. So I find that's my job, is to really kind of help them bring their. Now, will I try to sell them on something slightly different or slightly? Absolutely. If they go for it, great. If they don't, then that's okay too. I'm there to serve them. I'm never there to kind of push my own process. So that's a definite approach that I think is important, that we're there to help them. The director, especially on television, have a very limited amount of time, maybe not necessarily on this show, but on many others, so they learn to kind of make it work within the system, but also bring their own visual stamp to the show.
Yeah, and again with like TV, it's so fast moving. I think sometimes you can prep for 5 days and then shoot 5 days, and then you're just sort of, I wouldn't say like tripping over yourself, but you're sort of, you really need to make your days, because I guess time is money on these shows.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had a long time, let's say, on Pluribus. I don't even remember what it was, but I think it was patterned at something like 20 days an episode or something like that. Maybe a little bit more for Vince's. So we had a reasonable amount of time to work, and they were always great about giving us whatever tools we thought we needed. So I mean, just the one that we did, scene 46, and in the first episode, which was Carol driving in the truck, that we were mounted on the front of the truck. We spent a whole day rehearsing that and a whole day shooting it. So that's not conducive to your normal TV schedule, but it certainly allowed us the ability to make that shot as good as it could be, and in a lot of ways.
That's the Apple money, I tell you. It's the Apple money.
It's been Gilligan money. I mean, Yeah, they really wanted him to be part of the family. That's for sure.
But even like just hearing that sort of stuff where as a you spend a day rehearsing and then a day shooting. Are there any points where you're rehearsing it and there's where you just think I don't actually think this is going to be possible, or are you constantly thinking when you're rehearsing and you have your operator or your team working around it that I hope they're able to sort of get it right and then we can tweak it each time?
Yeah, I mean, we had, we spent the whole, probably half a day. We were actually in one of the other suites in Vegas on episode 6 for that shot. So I was able to bring the operator in and turn him loose and let him kind of develop that shot as, the walking and the handoffs and all of the things. So, there was definitely moments where I was wondering, if it was playing well throughout that whole journey, because it's quite the journey that the audience has to go along with. But, Vince has always been patient with that stuff. He lets it develop and oftentimes, even lets it develop on screen, let them anticipate what they're going to find. And so, yeah, it was quite the journey, that. And I mean, there are occasionally times, and I think we had a scene that was meant to take place in the first episode that we literally got to on the day. And Vince decided it just wasn't, he didn't think it was going to work visually, and so we bailed out of it completely. But that's very, very rare.
And I guess when you're so planned as well, you'll kind of have like a visual idea of how it's going to play out. And because you have a team that you can trust, I think you probably again just think about it in like I know they can get that shot. It won't be a problem, especially if I communicate it in a specific way. Then it'll be a walk in the park, which should be done by lunchtime.
Yeah, sure. Well, like the light, we were able to get the hotel to allow us to take the light down that was above the area where that poker table was going to go in 106, and hang our own light. I also there were a number of lights up in the ceiling that we could control on dimmers, but we couldn't isolate any of them. They were all tied together. So I actually ended up printing up and on a 3D printer some plastic pieces that would work either as a diffuser or as a snoot, or completely black it out so that we could control. They had magnets built into them so they could just stick to the ceiling. So that gave us a little bit more control on for stuff that we wanted to be able to control and couldn't any other way. And it was in the shot, so it couldn't be couldn't have black wrap or whatever on it. But yeah, but so it's kind of the thinking about what the possibilities are and kind of getting ahead of them up front. But again, we had a lot of prep. We went to Vegas weeks and weeks and weeks in advance and scouted all those locations, saw them all, saw all of the hiccups and the troubles, and even went back with the department heads and walked it through with them. So, again, we had the luxury of having time and time to think about it and problem solve.
Yeah, and I think as well, like when you have so much time and you're probably there with so much, what's it called? Having the schematics and thinking about the lights and how you were saying in Vegas, you can take the light out of there, which must have been a pretty big deal in general because, when you're working on location, I can imagine whoever owns the location can be, even though they'll be happy for you to come in, but they could be very sort of strict about what you can and can't do, especially if it's like because you shot in Elvis's suites. Again, there's probably things where they're just like, no, you can't do that because there could be such historical meaning to it, or it's something that you just can't touch because it's been wired a specific way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And those suites, I think they rented for something. I mean, they were, high roller suites. There were actually 3 of them up on that floor, which actually Elvis used to have the whole floor. But Um, I think they were like $20,000 a night suite. So, you didn't want to have 3 days of, rewiring or whatever we had to do to get out of there, because, it was a big deal for them. So, we had to be kind of low, impact and be able to get out of there pretty quickly.
Yeah, and again, time is money, but $20,000 a day, wow, that is
Yeah, that's
insane.
exactly what we said when they told us it. I mean, I think they comp them more often than they actually charge for them for people that are big high rollers, but still, that's the number. So it's like, okay.
Yeah, or it could be like walking around, it's like, huh, this is what $20,000 a day gets you. Is that it?
Yeah. And, we got to fly the drone from there and do a number of shots, around the hotel and really kind of see it from that vantage point, which was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I think as well, like having like a post-apocalyptic world in Vegas, I always find it sort of like, I guess you kind of experienced it with COVID when they had to shut down the casinos, and how I think one of the things was like when they were locking up, they're like, I don't have a key to the casino because it's been so many years that we're open 24/7 that no one knows where the keys are. So like I could imagine that plays like a part. It will maybe plays a part in the thinking of it because it would just be a constantly, it's a constant moving machine and industry.
Yeah, yeah. Although they are very, very highly regulated, so they have lots and lots of rules, as you can imagine. They had a table that we were wanting to put the camera by, and we couldn't. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I know what it was. We wanted to put a light up that was going to block a security camera, and they were like, no, 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 that's the camera that sees one of the tables, and that's against the rules. We could lose our license for that. It's like you don't want to be responsible for the gambling license of a multi-million-dollar hotel. So so you could go, okay, yeah, all right, we'll figure out a different way.
Yeah, imagine if somebody didn't pick that up and it just happened. Uh, Whoever finds that mistake or made that mistake, your stomach would absolutely drop as well.
Well, I was really impressed with the police officers in that town because we showed up. There must have been 30, 40, 50 police officers in squad cars that completely blocked off every entryway, every driveway, every walkway, so that we could shoot in multiple directions, like in front of the Stratosphere Hotel. They closed that entire boulevard down for us. Now, granted, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, but still, it was, Vegas is alive 24 hours. So I was really impressed with them. They knew exactly where to go and how to close it all off, and they made it happen. It was amazing.
I wonder again if they think this is crazy that we're doing all of this, with like not like as in like the police officers. Well, I guess they probably see so many crazy things in Vegas anyway, and it's also not the first time like people are filming there or that they have such big acts because there's always something happening in Vegas. But I wonder, like from their perspective, being like, what it must be like for someone to sort of shut down and know where to be and how they're going to lock off and who they don't let in. And I don't know, you said it's at 2 a.m., but come on, it's a city that never sleeps, so you're always going to have some sort of, you know,
Absolutely.
people stumbling out somewhere.
Yeah, and they were able to, to block the sidewalks, ask people to reroute. They were very polite about it, and so we got shots that needed little or no visual effects help to even sell it. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah, and even as like, I guess as a cinematographer as well, like be so much, it's probably quite fun as well being there, like knowing that you're in, I wouldn't say it feels like a forbidden fruit, but it's just one of those places because it doesn't shut down. Having that experience of being like, we're going to have this area, we're going to shoot it, and we have all this sort of presence behind us. It feels like a sort of like a bit like the anti 28 days later, where they had like a couple of minutes to shoot in certain parts of London before everybody came in because they didn't have permits or their permits were very limited.
Yeah, yeah, no, this was definitely by design, and they had a definite plan. And yeah, when you're standing there and there's not a soul, to be seen for blocks. It's kind of an experience you won't ever forget. That's for sure. We still talk about it on the crew, and that moment of looking around and just going, "Wow, this is crazy."
Yeah, we've done this. We did this.
Yeah,
Did someone
yeah,
remember to press record?
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Well, we got to double check that every time now. Also, just to make sure the guys are really good about that.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to go back to something that you said earlier about when you have scenes of Carol and Menounos and the way that they're framed, that they're pretty much going to be in every scene and always going to be there. Because their scenes are always with a mixture of people, but then also by themselves. How do you go about thinking about framing those scenes? Because the show is very much them driven. They are sort of pushing the narrative along. How do you go about making sure that these scenes are sort of visually interesting in what they're doing, but then also allowing the characters to perform the scenes so that the camera doesn't really get in the way of things?
Yeah, I mean, that's always in the forefront of our mind, as we're watching a rehearsal, that, we obviously don't want to get in their way. We don't want to be distracting to them as much as we can. But, coming up with visual ideas and to me, it's always, if there's something that escapes me, I can always go back to the script and read the scene again, and something will reveal itself visually. An idea for somebody's point of view, or whatever it might be. But the whole thing was that we try to stay as anchored to the whoever's story it is in this show as much as we can, especially with Carol. So we always have a piece of her in frame. We're always kind of her viewpoint. And so that really drove a lot of the visual approach to what we were going to be doing, because you couldn't come up with a shot that was behind a fence, or somebody's a shot that was handheld over in the corner to give it some life or something. It just didn't. It would feel like somebody's point of view, especially after we kind of stayed that way. So it limits the visual language a little bit, but it also kind of develops it and helps sharpen it a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, again, it's just really interesting because it is the sort of a show that is predominantly so character based that you're going to have to figure out how you're going to keep them there and have a part of them always there. Also, so much of a heavy lifting for the actors as well to be doing these shows, because instead of potentially being on set 5 days out of the 25, you're pretty much 20 to 20 out of the 25, and very dialogue heavy scenes as well,
Yeah.
with how they're played out.
The other thing that blew me away when I first read the scripts was the fact that Vince had sometimes minutes in the show where there was no dialogue, which is something that he's kind of known for. I mean, we did that a certain amount on Saul, but when you have the entire populace able to communicate without speaking to each other, that creates a bit of a storytelling challenge, as you can imagine, because you can't have somebody just involved in a conversation about what their approach is going to be, because they don't need to be. So it was a real risk, I thought, in a lot of ways on Vince's part, to be able to find a way to tell these stories with a whole, essentially 50% of the character base, not speaking, because they don't have to. So it was interesting to figure out ways to tell their story without them having to talk about it.
Yeah, and like I guess because it's just such a visual medium, not such a. Let me rephrase that. Because it is a visual medium, you could just play around with what people are doing and how they want to present, how they're behaving. Obviously, as a hive mind, they're all as one. So this is something that Jennifer Bryan, the costume designer, pointed out. It's like certain things they don't need to worry about, like cell phones or what sort of clothes they wear for like their statuses, because they're all as one. And you kind of think, oh yeah, like that makes so much sense. And then I guess visually you're showing it with how they're moving and how they're walking, or when Carol gets upset, how everybody gets affected by it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was a really kind of interesting twist. I thought that that her, emotions had such a strong effect on them, and obviously, it obviously in turn had a big strong effect on her too. But it's an interesting challenge. It really is. It can be, to try to tell that story and see what they're doing, and the fact that the people are always kind of marching towards bettering everybody else. They're all working together as a team, which is something that, storytelling wise, that Vince kind of delayed the real development of, so that, we started out thinking, it was your typical post-apocalyptic, alien invasion, and we end up wondering whether or not, Carol's the one that really has the problem, and is the world better off? So it's quite the transition, over the course of those episodes.
Yeah, and basically just like subverts the expectation as well, because it's like, how do we flip this on its head? And I think as well, like as I said, like with the visual storytelling this as well, it's like on this show you actually see the scope of the show and how big certain things are, and how you kind of show off not just like scenes like where the trucks are pulling in for the supermarket, but it's also an Air Force One as well, which is what a great visual gag. But it's also how everybody's in sync, and you have those aerial shots, and then you kind of think,
Yeah.
in your mind you're thinking, yeah, it's the whole planet, but you can't really comprehend millions of people. But then when you see the aerial shots, and then they're all coming on, and then they're saying, oh, please Carol, and you just think, actually this is a nightmare. How do you like get out of this?
Yeah, I mean, what is yeah, exactly. Especially since she blames them obviously for the loss in her life, and it has, kind of pre-existing ideas and thoughts about the way, things were, and really feels like the world should go back to the way it was, in her mind. But yeah, it's it was a challenge, because they didn't have to talk, because they were always busy doing stuff. There weren't, people kind of hanging around, and that, everything they were doing was about, bettering their existence. So I mean, going into the freezer that we did on episode 6, and revealing all of that stuff, including, by the way, if you don't know, or maybe people do, maybe it's out now, that head that she picks up is actually Vince's head. They took a cast of his face, just as an Easter egg. But it's quite the journey, and it's, you really kind of develop this doubt of what, where she's coming from. What's it all about? What is it she's really trying to achieve?
Yeah, and again, it's the silent film nature of no dialogues and how that's presented, but then also really getting across the size and magnitude of like what's going on,
Yeah.
to audience members. And yeah, I think there's just such a great mix of like horror, humor, to it all. Especially like when you got the Air Force One scene, because of course, if somebody says, "Oh, what plane did they turn up in that late?" Oh, what is it? Of course, somebody's going to pick Air Force One. Like, if you could pick any of them at all, then why wouldn't you pick Air Force One? Like,
Right, exactly. Well, you have to think of it, I suppose, it's like somebody, but obviously, and because that's where he wanted to be. It's where he wanted to live, was in Elvis's suite. So he came all the way across the world to inhabit that space in Las Vegas. Yeah, no, it was very cool. And Menounos' trip, we shot almost all of his stuff in South America on anamorphic lenses, to kind of just give it a kind of a different feel and different vibe. That whole sequence of at the storage place, going into all the units, trying to find food, and the flares and the cool stuff that we got out of that with the anamorphic stuff, with the anamorphic lenses, was really cool.
and when you think about those sort of moments where you're sort of changing lenses, and their visual style, um, do you feel like you can maybe play around with it more because one side might have a humorous side while somebody else who's figuring it out? Because Menounos' story, he has no idea what's going on. He's sort of got the height of paranoia. He has that sort of, I would say maybe like a parallax view sort of feeling, maybe all the president's men at the same time, of just, he's watching from the shadows and being like, who is this person coming to my house, dropping beautiful food off, but it could be poison, I don't know. And he has that always that constant paranoia and zero trust.
Well, but then he pays it off though in the end, because you find out, because it's the last line before he leaves on his trip is his mother, telling him that, it's all going to be okay, and I'm your mom, and he said, you're not my mother. My mother was a bitch. So he has some understanding that something is way off, and you are not the person that I grew up with. So it feeds that paranoia, obviously. But yeah, it was very cool. We shot all that storage stuff actually in a place in Albuquerque. But then, as the trip kind of progressed, we went to the Canary Islands with Vesca, and had the midget there with us, the MG midget, which was cool. It was a lot of fun, and Paul did such a great job with that sequence. I was really impressed.
And it's like, again, crazy to think how, again, moving magic, you've got Gran Canaria doubling up as Paraguay, and the Panama Gap as well, and how that sort of plays into it. But then I guess it also comes down to production designer Denise and her work, and how her team and set deck come in to dress all the sets and whatnot. But even going back, sorry, to when you talk about the cul-de-sac being built and those areas, how much better is it for you knowing that the set is a build rather than location, especially when it comes to something like this, where there is, you can be very specific about colors and where lights can go, but then also maybe have conversations about where windows are going to be, because there's so much daylight in the show as well.
Yeah, well, that, and they designed that cul-de-sac so that not only did it make sense, but that she could drive in without feeling like she was coming into an isolated movie set, but also that we had 150 trucks within walking distance that were in a place that was never going to be photographed, because they were designed that way. All of those homes are occupied by different departments. They're actually not houses, they're just shells. But there's a grip house and an electric house and the set dressing house, and where they stage their gear and can hide in between scenes and stuff like that. So it worked out really well, and we have so much more control. I can, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can run up and change the porch lights, without knocking on the door and asking the homeowner. Something I probably wouldn't even do. I wouldn't bother them, but so it's a level of control that really gives you artistic control over all of the colors, all of the intensities, the placement of the street lights. We went back and forth about that for a week, I think, and they're in exactly the right place for all the different angles that we thought we were going to need. So that's all a level of control you don't have any other way.
Yeah, I also imagine disturbing a neighbor at 2 a.m. Yeah, can I change your bulb, please? That would go down like a fart in an elevator. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. As I used to say, a fart in church.
Yeah. But I do feel like those sort of moments as well have, when you have those houses for departments as well, it probably helps production so much, because it's like now those departments can't complain about being too far away from set when they have their own sort of house to have all the equipment there as well. But also with like the cul-de-sac idea, it feels like as well, like visually for Carol, it's like she's like she could siege herself in, because she has the front covered, and then also the back can be covered as well, because you know the whole area, even though it's open. You can still have the your fencing up and whatnot. But also it's like that security, as you're mentioning, coming into our own area and being sort of hidden away a bit as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And her, it's, watching her discover how much control or how much they are watching her. What is it? How is it they're, that they know all these details? Are they spying on her? Are there cameras in the house? Is there, and then she finds out it's the satellite, and so she can close all the blinds and kind of at least know that she's safe inside, and nobody's listening. And so it's all a journey of discovery. Seeing it through her eyes and finding out exactly what she's finding out.
And yeah, it's quite, again, visually, it's great to experience as an audience member. I've got 3 questions left for you.
Okay.
So for my third from final question, what was your favorite scene that you didn't shoot?
That I didn't shoot?
Yeah.
Oh, I would say that the Ice Hotel was pretty phenomenal. And they did Paul did such a great job with it, and it really paid off. It was a very cool set. It was on stage. There were lots of discussions about how they were going to keep it cold enough so that people could wear fur coats or see breaths and the northern lights that Paul created out the window. And I mean, I would say that's definitely high on the list. And potentially even the journey, Nuisance's journey through the Darien Gap was pretty cool to watch too and discover.
Solid choices. I think, yeah, the Ice Hotel, that visually looks incredible and makes you want to stay in the Ice Hotel. I think the only experience I think as an audience member I've had as Ice Hotel is like James Bond. What was it? It was like Die Another Day or something like that. Maybe it's that one where they have the Ice Hotel, and yeah, it doesn't have that same feel to it. And maybe because in Pluribus you have the Northern Lights there and a whole different experience as well. But yeah, it was visually really cool.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And I mean, he did such a great job. And, that was all on stage, as you can imagine. So, basically starting from scratch. And, how to present it with, putting LED screens out there or blue screens or green screens or anyway. And the fact, that's probably one of the only times we'll get to flash back on a hotel like that's, functioning because that was before the joining, so it's fun to be able to do that stuff and experience it.
Yeah, and especially like as an audience member as well, like not every day you get to see an Ice Hotel, and again, like it must have been so fun to build as well, to sort of how do you play around visually with it? What are the sort of things that what you wouldn't have as in a regular hotel? Like you probably don't have like hair dryers, for example, because
Yeah, good
melt the whole
point. Yeah.
place down.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It can't turn you loose with the one thing that's going to kill the hotel, right? But also, the fact that all the luggage carts were on sleds, and had to be able to kind of make their way down the hallway on skates, essentially. I know Paul had a good time kind of developing a way to get a camera on one of those. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and again, it's like the creativity of it. It's like, yeah, put on skates. It's like simple but genius at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
And for my penultimate question, what was your favorite episode to shoot? I mean, favorite scene to shoot, sorry.
Boy, oh boy, there were some good ones. I mean, I think that the stuff in Vegas was a lot of fun, but I think, and it literally was our first week of the show was at the VLA, at the Very Large Array, which just was such a cool experience. Those dishes are always listening. The fact that we were able to put lights on the mall, and actually we had to shut. They paid to shut the place down because all of our dimmer packs and radios and people's cell phones. I mean, you can't have a cell phone within a half mile of those things when they're operating. So it would just being able to do that on such a large scale. Those dishes, they're all 135 feet tall. And they're, being able to light an entire row of them and see, that shot that we did with the truck kind of coming through from the staging area of the VLA. I would say that was probably my favorite place to shoot, and just because of the experience, it was an amazing place.
Again, that Apple and Vince money, I'll tell you. Again, but there's so much choice because it looks so cool. And like, as audience members, again, another sort of cool thing is like seeing the satellites and those sort of areas working, because again, maybe we're just so used to when somebody says satellites are in the sky, or satellites are here picking up signals or bouncing signals for us to use our phones, as you said, radios, and anything else that gives us a signal. We don't really have like a visual of like what it can be. And then also at the same time, like the sheer size of these things as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the fact that, the really crazy part is that they move them every few months. They spread them out to make it essentially a wider functioning single dish almost. And then they bring them together so that they can really focus it. So they move them every couple of months, and they have this whole train system that they literally unbolt them from their foundations and lift them up and move them out on these trains. It's quite the endeavor. It's just even learning about that was an amazing thing, and the fact that we wanted to get their tightest configuration that we could, and we just couldn't get our stuff together in time to start the show. So we actually got the second tightest configuration. They had just moved them about a week before we shot there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Even looking at that must have been like, wow, I can't believe this is like the sort of logistics of just moving this thing and what's going on. So this is someone's job as well, that they need to really like make sure they got the right people moving it, because again, the cost of if somebody breaks one of those things,
imagine that it's 135 feet tall, and you got to pick it up with essentially what's an overgrown forklift, and then set it down on its bolt holes, which are, it's a dozen of them that it has to line up with, which are like an inch across at the most, or
imagine
3 centimeters.
getting one butthole wrong. It's like, oh, man.
They have to take them in and work on them every so often too, because there's always one dish that's in the shop, which was fun to watch them. I actually watched them take a guy to the very top, 130 feet, drop him off in a Condor. He slid down through the center cone of that thing, somehow unbolted a box inside of it, and then they went down with the cherry picker and met him at the bottom as he popped out the bottom with this thing. It was like, wow, that's impressive, because he could barely slither his body down into this place. It was pretty amazing.
What? Like, what kind of job is this? Like,
well, they have, there are very sensitive instruments inside that they have to change out every so often. The dishes were built in the 70s. They're in the process of kind of revamping them with new electronics and stuff like that. But yeah, so they're always being maintained and fixed, and whatever they need to do.
Again, crazy. Like, that's somebody's job. It basically sounds like you're describing, like, again, a James Bond film. They have to secretly go in to unhook everything so that it works.
Yeah.
It must be so flexible and like fearless to do that as well when you're sliding through.
Yeah. Well, this was a perfect Vince-ism too. Because we had shut the place down, we had control over those dishes. So when in certain angles, when we wanted to rotate them towards us 5 degrees, we could do that. The only caveat was that they automatically, at a 40-mile-an-hour wind, which happens fairly often in there, they go into what they call bird bath mode, which is where they're just straight up in the air, because that's the narrowest profile to the wind. But yeah, just looking down that line of these things that are, as big as they are, I'd say, yeah, can we move them 5 more degrees towards the camera a little bit? Was quite the moment, as you can imagine.
Yeah, and again, yeah, wow, insane. Just trying to picture all of it, and just sort of, you probably marvel at like how people do things. And I bet you that guy who's it's like sliding down, probably looks at you guys being like, you guys got the coolest job in the world. It's like, I don't know, buddy, like, sounds like you could.
Yeah, right. The grass is always greener, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And then for my final question, I've stolen this sort of thing from a documentary filmmaker called Rachel J. Morrison. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to mention, or is there a question that you want to ask me?
Not that I can think of. I mean, we covered, a lot of the bases. I mean, the only I can say, people potentially tuning in for visual information, about what we used and how we did it. We carried, luckily with Vince, again, we had the money to have lots and lots of different lenses. We carried macros, we carried probe lenses, we carry the Ronin 4D actually, and we could take that off and put it inside the vending machine, that shot that's inside the vending machine looking out. We had this much space, and that was, exactly what that camera occupied. It was the X9. But yeah, no, I think you covered the base as well. That's good. That's a lot of fun.
Perfect. Marshall, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely, Rob. It's a pleasure to meet you, man. Great to talk to you.
And it was great talking to you. Pluribus season 1 is streaming now on Apple TV. Go out and watch Marshall and his team's amazing work. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. That was a great way out. I like that.
And I'll take that. No, it's all you and the team. Marshall, it's all you and the team. You take care, and bye-bye now.
Oh, you got it. Thanks, Bob. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.